All right, I'm going to do a demo on sizing a chimney liner and going through some of the rules regarding the capacities and how to figure out when you probably need one or should have a chimney liner in a vent system. And this, I will preface this by, this doesn't necessarily have to be a masonry chimney liner. This could be a liner that could be in a B-vent system. Anything where you've got a vent system that's really excessively large or it's too big for the application. So let's start by that. So the handout that I have on here is I'm going to recap 13.1.7 in the code book, in the National Fuel Gas Code Book, where they discuss corrugated chimney liners. And it's saying a listed corrugated chimney liner system in a masonry chimney shall be sized using table 13.1a or 13.1b for B vents. So what they're saying is that when you're going to put a liner in one of these systems, what you're doing is you're going to be using the same table as what you would use for a single appliance that would be vented in a B vent system because it's got similar characteristics. The capacity has to be reduced by 20% of the maximum capacity, and then of course the minimum capacity would be shown in those tables as well. But generally that's not going to be the issue. You have to kind of concern yourself with elbows and bends and offsets. So if you've got further or more elbows and offsets, you would have to reduce them even further than that. So that there's a 20% reduction for a corrugated liner system that includes the allowance for one long radius 90-degree turn at the very bottom of the liner. So the point that I want to make there is they are reducing it by 20%. The reduction of the 20% is primarily due to the resistance of the vent system, as well as expecting that there will be a 90-degree bend at the bottom of that chimney system that protrudes out to where you can connect to your existing vent connector for that appliance. So let's take a look further. So there's a couple of frequently asked questions that we want to head up. And the first question is, does a corrugated chimney liner have the same capacity as a regular or similar size smooth wall liner or vent? And of course, because that installed system or liner has similar heat loss that is typical of a B vent, they're sized using the 13.1 and 13b, or either one of those two. The corrugations, such as in those liners, have a tendency to spiral, and they are not smooth typically. And that chimney would require that 20% reduction. That vent system would need to have their maximum reduced by 20%. Second question frequently asked is, does the turn or the bend at the bottom of the liner count as an elbow? So you notice how the tables in National Fuel Gas Code Book describes that the code allows for the use of two elbows and two 90-degree turns. And if anything more than that, you'd have to do a further reduction. Well, since they recognize that most liners are going to begin at that opening of the chimney wall where you've got to bend, you got to go straight through the wall, then go vertically up to try to get into the chimney. That 90-degree elbow is kind of where that start of the liner works its way. So the code describes that you want a 20% reduction, including one 90-degree elbow, which is formed when the liner is bent to exit that chimney at that bottom. So the capacity reduction for that is part of that process. So in conclusion, when they did the tables, the 20% reduction included the 90-degree elbow at the bottom and for the extra resistance of the liner corrugations. All right, so let's take a look at this next area. And I want to preface this of why would we be concerned with this, and why would even a discussion of a liner be concerning? So the first thing I'm going to address is when you typically have multiple appliances, and most of the buildings that might see this, they might have had a boiler, they might have had a furnace that had and that had multiple or two appliances that were vented in a common chimney. And then maybe, due to upgrades, they chose that, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the one appliance that, one of the two appliances doesn't necessarily have to be larger, but you're removing one of those two appliances. Typically it's the larger one. And what you're going to do then is you're left behind with just one appliance in a vent system that was sized to handle two or more of those appliances that were vented in there. So that's really the tricky part of that. So typically you run into a capacity problem where that smaller appliance or that other left alone appliance that's now venting in this bigger vent system will start to have problems with it not wanting to vent properly, or have problems with excessive condensation, which will even eat away at the aluminum. So that is of course a concern. You really have to watch out for the upsizing and the downsizing. And a good rule of thumb to use is you typically never upsize more than two sizes bigger than the other appliance or the left behind. So that would, and I'll go through an example with this as far as coming up here. So in my my next page is I'll do two examples, and then I identify in there that the following problems listed assume a natural draft furnace was removed, and then it was replaced with some sort of a direct vent condensing furnace, or maybe it could be a condensing boiler. It could be a number of those, and we're going to size that liner accordingly to determine, first of all, if it's needed, and we'll figure it out based on the code book, using the National Fuel Gas Code Book. The tables that we'll use in those would be 13.1A or 13.1B. And again, 13.1A, you'll probably remember, was for a B-vent system using B-vent directly going to the appliance. So that included the connector. And a 13.1B was for a single wall vent connector into a B-vent system. So you can watch for that. So you have to deduct for the liner the 20% from the maximum. Watch for the rules and elbows and upsizing and downsizing, things like that. And I did put a little note in here on the upsizing. Do not exceed the area of the collar size by more than 2 collar sizes, as far as your determination of whether you really require a liner or if you don't. So, and that's in 13.113 out of the Fuel Gas Code Book. All right. So I'd like to take a look at this particular example. So the first one that I have identified here is I've got a system one as a water heater that was common vented with another appliance, but we're pulling out one of the two. So we're left with a category 1 draft hood water heater that has a BTU input of 40,000 BTUs. The liner, or in this particular case here, the B-vent, or the connector, is a B-vent connector right here, and the draft hood coming out of the water heater is a 3-inch. And so a couple other things, 2 elbows, 2 90-degree elbows, okay, we're good there. The vent connector has a 2-foot rise and a 5-foot lateral. And we are currently venting this into a masonry 38 square inch chimney. Vent height is 15 feet. So we're going to take a look at it. So our two things that we have to figure out is, do we need a liner, number one, and number two, what is the size? So how do I go through that process? So the process that I have outlined here is in 13.17, the corrugated liners that they describe in 5496 of the 2018 Fuel Gas Code Book describes that you have to do the 20% reduction. Okay, so no problem there. We'll take care of that. 13.113 upsizing says you cannot exceed the area of a collar size by more than 2 collar sizes. So really what that means then is if it's determined that my flue collar coming out of the appliance is a 3-inch or a 4-inch, it'll be a 3-inch would mean that I can only go up 2 sizes. So let me describe that process. All right. So if there is a 3-inch collar, which in this problem we have a 3-inch draft hood collar that has an area of 7.056 square inches. So if we were going to upsize that by 2 collars, that would be a 5-inch collar. So a 5-inch collar area has an area of 19.625 square inches. That's shown right here in this problem. So our common vent, our vent area cannot exceed the 19.625. So in our problem, we had a masonry chimney of 38 square inches. So as you can tell, that 38 square inches far exceeds the 19.625 square inches, which was the vent system area when we went 2 sizes bigger. So in this case, that deems us as the liner is absolutely, definitely required. So when we document or write down our answer here, is a liner required? Absolutely, yes it is. Now we got to look at the size. All right, so let's take a look at some of these. So I'm going to go back to the code book and I want to show you some of these things. So there are, one of the areas that I had shown you, I just talked about, was 13.17, talks about the corrugated liners. And that's going to be described here. There is all the typical things, so like downsizing and things like that you got to be careful with and follow those rules. So you have to remember that what you're doing now is as you had a system that had multiple appliances and now you're going to cut it down to one appliance, you have to now follow the rules of a single appliance that's vented into that system. Is the way that it is, so the way that it works. All right, so let's take a look at this one. So in our problem, we have a B-vent connector that's identified here. We have a 40,000 BTU unit. We've got a lateral of 5 and a height of 15. So we're going to figure out what we need to do. So I'm going to show you in the code book, being that this one is directly connected to that appliance. So my picture that I've shown here identifies this as a B-vent connector. So you'll notice right here, type E double wall connector, and we're going from so this is our draft hood connection point. We're going to leave this thing and go directly into our system. So now we know that we are going to be using a liner. So we're going to essentially have a liner going up to here and making our way over to connect to this point. And most likely this will be connected right here. That's where the liner will end up going. So let's take a look at the code. So the key things to remember are the 5-foot lateral and the 15-foot vent height. So let's go to the code tables. So in my example, I happen to have a vent system. Again, we're looking at a single category 1 appliance connected directly to the vent with B-vent. And what we're going to be looking at is a 15-foot, which is this column, and the lateral is also important, and that was 5 feet. So what we're going to do is take a look at a couple of things. So first thing we're going to look at is the natural max connection at a 3-inch is 45,000. So if we saw that as being 45,000 BTUs as the capacity, and we were to reduce it by, if you remember, the unit was 40,000. To eliminate a bunch of work and extra, unneeded work, 45,000. If you even take 10% of the 45,000, that would be 4,500. Now we're already at 40,500 BTUs. Now you need another 10%. So we're looking really at a 9,000 BTU reduction in capacity, which would then bring me well below the capacity. So we can absolutely eliminate this one here. That can be eliminated. We don't even need to look at that. All right. So let's take a look at the 4-inch, which is the next one. So the natural max column for a 4-inch is going to be having a capacity of 87,000 BTUs. So now, if you take 20% of the 87, we're going to be in pretty good shape, I think. So this one, I think, is going to be pretty straightforward. So I've already done some of the math for us just for the sake of time. So when I looked at table 13.1a and I saw that my 13.1a table, the capacity of the 3-inch vent was 45,000. If I take 20% off, that brings me to 36,000. I'm way too low already. So if I look at the 4-inch vent, it had a capacity of 87,000 BTUs. If I take 20% off of that, I'm at a capacity of 87,000 times 0.8 or 69,600 BTUs. That is the capacity of this system. So in that case, what is the size needed? Without a doubt, we definitely are going to need a 4-inch vent chimney liner. So, and yes, we do need that. It's going to be 4-inch, and away we go. So that is how you essentially figure that out. So the process, just to recap a few of these, is we're looking at, first of all, figuring out, making sure we're looking at upsizing and downsizing. We're looking at going 2 sizes bigger at the most to determine whether we need the liner or not. It's certainly not going to hurt you if you put the liner in, as long as you size it correctly. And if anything, it'll enhance the venting. And then just figure out the size and if it's right. So, all right, let's take a look at one more example. So in my example, the second example, what I did was I took an appliance that was a water heater that was category 1 draft hood. And in this particular application, it's a 50,000 BTU unit. It's a little bit bigger. And this 50,000 BTU appliance has a draft hood flue collar diameter of 4 inches. And it's using single wall vent pipe for the connector. So we've got 2 elbows. We have a lateral of 4 feet. And we have a chimney height of 23 feet. So it's going into a masonry chimney that's 50 square inches. So let's take a look at some of the math behind this. So in this particular case, again, we'll look at a 4-inch collar, and again, we're going to follow our upsizing and downsizing rules. A 4-inch collar has an area of 12.57 square inches. If we go up 2 sizes or 2 collars, that would be a 6-inch vent system. And a 6-inch collar or vent system would have an area of 28.27 square inches, approximately. Now, our vent area can't exceed the 28.27 square inches. So with a masonry chimney of 50 square inches, we are definitely in need of a liner. So in this particular case here, this one is a done deal. Yes, is the liner needed? Absolutely, it's definitely needed. So I'm going to put that in here. Yes, I need the liner. Now we got to figure out the sizing. Now I want to save you a little bit of time in doing some of the interpolation, so it doesn't have to be too difficult. So you're going to use some of the rules that we used before. So I want to bring to your attention this 23-foot vent height with a 4-foot lateral to determine how much interpolation is really needed. So I'm going to show you the table first. So I'm going to go back to my fuel gas code book, and I need to use the proper table. So that's 13.1b. So I'm going to skedaddle over to this one. All right, so here's 13.1b. And I'll highlight that one. And what we're going to do, it's a single wall vent connector. That's what we have here, and it's one appliance. So we had a system that was 23 feet. So the rules that I had mentioned in previous videos, I had said make sure you go to a shorter vent system, because if it's good at the shorter, it's going to be good at the taller of the two. So let's start with the 20, and then the laterals, you err to the bigger one if it's needed. So I'm going to show you what I have here. So in this particular case here, and I'll switch the colors, I have 20, and I'm going to go to the 5-foot one. And in this particular case, a 3-inch, if I were to even downsize it once, which it's not going to even be possible. If you look at the numbers here, we're not even in the vicinity. Even if I go up to a 30, 56 and a 52, there is absolutely, we're not even close. There's no way that we're going to be using any of those. So in my opinion, don't waste your time on a 3-inch in this case. Let's go to the 4-inch one. So on the 4-inch, 20-foot and a 5-foot lateral, now we're up to 94,000, and with a 2-foot lateral we're at 99,000. So now we have a lot of cushion and a lot of wiggle room to determine, you know, if that's going to work in there. So my first instinct is using the 20 and the 5-foot lateral. We're at 94,000. So that's even like a worst case scenario. And if we were to take the 20% off of that, we are still well above the appliance capacity that we need to put into that system. So that's probably going to be the system. So let's go to the next to my system that I have here. So I did some of the math already ahead of time, and I also went through a little bit of a small interpolation example to maybe help a little bit with some of this. So we determined that a liner was needed, and if we look at this, I've outlined here a liner that is, there we go. I've outlined that a 2-foot lateral on a 20-foot vent has capacity of 99. A 5-foot lateral with a 20-foot vent is 94,000. So the way that you do interpolation between the table values is, as an example, and it would be the same whether you did the laterals or you did the vent heights. It's still interpolation. So, and it's always a proportion. So in this example, the interpolated value of the capacities of that system is there's a difference between this one and this one of 5K. And we have a difference between this one and this one of 3 feet. So in this case, I took the 5K divided by the 3 feet, and I came up with 1,000 or 1.667 K per foot of lateral. So that means that every time that I go with a 1 foot less of lateral from the 5 foot, I will gain capacity by 1,667 BTUs for every foot of lateral that I can take off of there. Now, since our lateral of 4 feet, you know, we are of course 1 foot away from the 5-foot lateral. So now that tells me that I would need to add that 1,667 per foot of lateral to the 5-foot row. Now, here's the reason why. At a 5-foot lateral, we have 94,000 capacity, and at a 2-foot lateral, which is a shorter lateral, we have more capacity. So that tells me that I need to add the 1,667 BTUs to the 5-foot to get us to what it would be at the 20-foot column as far as the height, and a 4-foot lateral in this case. So going further on here, adding that capacity, that would essentially give us 95,667 BTUs of capacity. So there again, the way I would do this is that if when we looked at our capacities, we are so far above the BTUs of this appliance of the 50,000, there's really not a big need to try to figure out exactly what it would be at a 23-foot vent system. And so there's really no need to go through and do the 30-foot and figure and interpolate those out. So if I needed to do that, I would literally have had to figure out the interpolated value. I would have had to have figured out the interpolated value of this one, of that at right whatever the 4-foot would be, that would be in between these two. And at a 30, I would have had to done the same thing. What is a 4-foot at a 30? And I would have had to identify exactly what the capacities are here as well as here, and then figure the percentage of what it would be, just like I did earlier, of, you know, how much capacity do you lose for every 1,000 or every foot of vent height. And again, it's really not needed in this case, so there's no reason to make extra work for yourself. So in this example, I'll go further through this. In my example that I'm dealing with here is I've got the 3-inch capacity we determined was way too low, and I just ballparked it that it was approximately about 48,000 BTUs of capacity. And if you take off 20% of that, we're already down to 38.4. We're way too low. We're not even close. So we're not even going to look at that. Then if I look at a 4-inch, when I looked at the 4-inch at approximately a height of 20 feet, which was a worst case scenario, we had 95.67 as an approximate value. And if I reduce it by 20%, Now we're at approximate capacity of about 76,534 BTUs. So either way, we're still fairly at a much higher capacity than the 50,000 BTUs of appliances that I need to vent into that system. So this one here is a textbook example that we are definitely going to be using a 4-inch B vent as my liner, or I'm sorry, a 4-inch chimney liner that will be in my masonry system. And that's how you essentially would do a liner for that particular appliance. So again, single wall appliance that we're showing here. You do the same sizing rules and so on and so forth. You go back to your code book. You identify what your capacities are. You determine if interpolation is really even needed. In some cases it might be, but I think there's enough wiggle room in a lot of these that we should be in pretty good shape. And just watch your upsizing and downsizing rules. All right. So if just another little quick one here. What if this were not a liner or a tile line masonry chimney? What if this masonry system that I'm showing here was a B-vent system and it was oversized? The rules still apply. You still do the same process. If you still go through and you say, okay, as long as we're not two sizes too much, we should, then, yep, we need it, or no, we don't need it. You also have to watch the codes. Some of the codes will say you absolutely must have a chimney liner per the code because of the known issue with condensation and the damage that it creates in a vent system. So that is an example of how to do chimney liner sizing and a little demo on that.